What made you want to kind of rewrite this book? As like, I could see a lot of people, they have a bad experience and they're just
Mhm.
like, I don't want to, I'm just going to do something totally different. What made you want to rewrite it and then re-release it?
Yeah. So first part is I never finished the series back then.
Hmm.
So there's going to be 4 books eventually in this series, and I had only written 3 of them. I had taken a pretty long hiatus from writing. I had graduated college, I was getting a job, bought a home, a condo, technically. Just life kind of gets in the way, right? So I
Hmm.
hadn't written anything for like 5 or so years. So I just never finished the series. And honestly, it's a pretty simple answer. I is my first one, and I just love it.
Hmm.
You know, I love the story. I love the characters that I created, and I love the world. Obviously, it got a pretty major revamp
Hmm.
when I rewrote it. All the characters changed names too. Some place names changed, all that sort of stuff. But the bare bones of the world and the story remain the same.
Hmm.
And I said, you know what? I need to finish this. Both for me to feel a sense of completion and because I feel like this sounds so weird to say. I feel like I'm doing a disservice to these fictional characters that I created to
Yeah.
not finish their story.
Yeah.
And
No, that
that's
makes
really the
sense.
reason. Yeah, that's really about it. So I was hoping to have more of them out by now. It's 2024. I started rewriting it in 2020,
Hmm.
and there's only one of them is out. I was hoping to be a little bit further along, but hey, life
Yeah.
happens.
Life does happen. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
So do you kind of getting into the process of rewriting? So
yeah.
did you kind of replot it first? Did you outline it, or did you just kind of go into like how did you go about the rewriting and to get to where it is today?
That's a great question. So I'm a meticulous plotter and outliner, that's for sure.
Hmm.
Some of my outlines are like longer than a lot of short stories.
Mm.
Like I'll do like 5 to the last book I wrote was probably almost a 10,000 word outline of what I wanted to see happen.
Hmm.
So essentially, I outlined what I wanted the new book to be. Because one of the major components of it is actually, you know what? Before I get into that, I do want to mention one thing before the rewrite.
Hmm.
Initially, my quote unquote rewrite was just fix up the grammar, make the sentences sound a bit better, but otherwise leave everything the same. And then my initial plan was I was actually going to query it, like try to get traditionally published.
Hmm.
That was dashed pretty quickly because I was reading things about like never query a previously self-published book, all that sort of stuff. So I posted to the Facebook group called Subbit Club. People listening to this podcast, writers may have heard of it. It's fairly popular with people who are trying to be traditionally published. They are query letter, all that sort of thing, critique group.
Yeah.
I posted a draft of my letter in there for critique because I wanted to query agents. I wish I remembered this person's name because it's the best advice I ever got.
Hmm.
She commented on my post and she said, "Your writing is beautiful." I'm like, "Oh, gee, thanks." But I think your main character lacks agency. They feel like they're a leaf in the wind, going wherever the wind takes them without any motivation of their own. And I
Hmm.
went, huh, that's a really good point. And I was reading through the chapters, I was reading through the book, and I was like, damn, just from my query letter, she's right. My main character lacks agency. My main character lacks motivation. He is really just being told to do things, and he says, sir, yes, sir, and does them. So I said to myself, this is going to need a more substantial rewrite than just
Yeah.
make the current book grammatically better.
Right.
So I ended up writing most of these new, I added about 30,000 words to the original word count. Most of that came from an entirely new section at the beginning of the book that is more revolved around the main character, his journey, and why he's doing what he does.
Hmm.
That's where the whole possession aspect came from as well.
Yeah.
So that's how I molded in there. Then once I had that, I plotted the rest of the book from it. And, I give my 19-year-old self some credit because I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know what? The plot structure of this book is actually not bad. The writing kind of sucks, but the plot structure was there. He had something going.
The bones were there.
The bones were there. There
Yeah.
was something good about it that
Hmm.
could be saved with just more experience, more expertise, and better character work. And I'm like, okay, I can work with this. So I plotted out that first part, plotted out the rest of the book, and then I got to chopping words and rewriting.
Yeah.
It took me a solid month and a half to do it.
Mhm.
And that was, they say kill your darlings, right? A lot of darlings were killed
Right.
during that month. There was
Just
a lot going on.
slashing and burning.
Yeah. I did save all of it, you know, not that I'll ever use it again, but I save it as sort of, you know, this is where I was and
Yeah.
look where I am now kind of thing.
Well, there may be a nugget of something in there eventually to, you know.
And you know what? There is.
Yeah.
The last line of the book is the last line of the book I wrote when I was 19.
Yeah. Nice.
And you know what? It's not there because of mental sick. No, it's actually pretty good. I'm not going to say it, obviously. It's a spoiler. But I said, you know what? If I'm going to keep any lines from this original book, this is the one I'm going to keep.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you talked about, or that person said that in that comment about agency with the character. I remember the very first draft I ever did of the book that I'm working on. I remember handing it to my brother who he writes, and we kind of work on stuff together. And he basically said the same thing. He goes, you know, this is pretty good. You got some cool stuff in here. He goes, but like, what's the point of the main character? I said, what do you mean?
What are you talking about?
And he's like, well, like the character doesn't, like, there's no reason for the character to be there. Like stuff's just happening to him.
Yep.
And they're just responding and there, but they're not actually a point to them. And I think that's definitely a young writer. When you first write something, you're just kind of like exploring and you're like, I don't know why this character is doing anything, but
they're just here.
They're just there.
But you know what though? That's hard, right? Agency is hard. Giving proper motivation to a character, even the main character, maybe it's the villain, any character in your work, that's hard to do. You know, that's a common complaint of, you know, works you'll see even by famous writers, TV shows, movies. I mean, you'll see it everywhere. It's very hard to make a compelling case for a main character or a villain or anything like that. And I think that's a skill a lot of writers have to give themselves credit for. You know, if you gave your character motivation, if you made a believable quest or whatever they have to do, I'd say that deserves some kudos because that people don't talk about it really, but that's not easy.
Yeah. Why do you think it's not easy? Like, what would be what's the reason for that?
You know, it's because when I think of stories, I think of the cool stuff that happens. I don't necessarily think of maybe how a character reacted to it. Like if I'm going to retell the plot of The Lord of the Rings,
right? I
will say, and then they went to the Mines of Moria. It was so cool. But why did they go to the Mines of Moria is a point that I might skip over.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's why things could happen, but I think that's probably what happened to me. I thought, oh, these scenes are really cool, but I just got to make up some BS to get to the scene.
Yeah.
But in reality, you got to have some sort of agency for them to, or motivation for them to do the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's got to be a reason for the story existing. And for, you know, I started mine with mostly world building. I just was, I thought of a cool world. I thought of a cool premise. And then I kind of had to like find a story and characters to put in it. So I think that was part of it, where it was just like I was matching characters to the world. So it's taken me quite a while to finally be like, okay, I feel like this is the direction to, you know, that they all have to go.
But once you hit it though, you hit it. And that's where you go. It's great. It's a great feeling to know once you finally get there.